everybody, welcome to Let's Talk. I'm John, and today we're going to be talking about Cat People, a 1982 erotic horror film directed by the legendary Paul Schrader. And we're going to be talking about its brand new Scream Factory 4K Blu Ray release. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu Ray reviews, movie reviews, TV reviews, tech reviews, we try and do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps out more than by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Cat People was released on April 2nd, 1982, 10 years to the day before I was born, and it stars Natasha Kinski, Malcolm McDowell, John Hurd, and Annette O'Toole, with some other popular faces floating around, such as Frankie Faison actually is in this film, but he's dubbed over, which is very strange. But this is very much an 80s horror film directed by Paul Schrader. Now, Paul Schrader, I've said on this channel, is one of my personal favorite directors and writers, but this is a very different film than I'm used to Paul Schrader directing. I've seen this film a couple times before. It's not one of my personal favorite Paul Schrader films. It's actually just not one of my personal favorite films in general. I think it's okay. I just think it's a very uneven film. Like, there's certain parts of this movie that I really enjoy, that I really love, and it's really the craftsmanship of the filmmaking that keeps me invested. The score is incredible. The way this is shot, the best scenes of this movie are the scenes that don't even involve dialogue. Like, the opening credits are gorgeous. It's got this green font over like a burnt orange sand the entire time while it's blowing around. I just thought that was beautiful, and that leads right into a very extended sequence without dialogue, and they do this about 3 times in the movie, where the movie's just moving along and just the score is moving the film along, and those are actually my favorite scenes in the entire movie. Not that the acting is bad, it's just very uneven. But the basic plot of this movie is that Malcolm McDowell and Natasha Kinski are long-lost brother and sister. They find each other, and then it's revealed that Malcolm McDowell's character, after he has sex, he turns into a big black leopard. And the only way that he can turn back into a human is by actually killing somebody. So in the early part of this movie, we see him have sex with somebody, and then we see him get caught by the animal control people, played by John Hurt and Annette O'Toole. And they take him to the zoo, and he has no way of escaping this zoo because at this point, he is a black leopard, so he's stuck in the zoo, but eventually somebody reaches their arm in there and he's able to kill them, which turns him back into a human being. He explains this to Natasha Kinski's character that they come from a long line of basically hybrid leopard people, where their ancestors were leopards, but they found a way to evolve into humans, and now they are cursed. The only way that they could actually make love without turning into a leopard is by actually mating with each other. The only way they can turn back human, like I said, is by killing another human being after they've had sex with somebody. And this creates a problem for Natasha's character in the sense that now she's falling in love with John Hurt, but she can't make love to John Hurt no matter what, because unfortunately, if she does, she is going to turn into a giant leopard. And that's basically the dilemma of this film, and also seeing Malcolm McDowell's character being a serial killer, essentially, just because he has no control of his sexual desires, whereas Natasha Kinski's character knows that she can't do this because she doesn't want to turn into what he is, which is essentially a monster. You know, he has to murder somebody to come back to being human, but it's a very tragic character when you really think about it. You know, he can't control his urges, which eventually leads to other people's deaths, and I'm guessing that's the moral message of this movie. And Malcolm McDowell, for me, is the shining star of this movie. I thought he did a phenomenal job in his co-starring role. He's not in this movie as much as I thought he was, or as I remembered him being in this movie, but he does a phenomenal job. He steals the scenes, he's chewing the scenery. You know, he has such an iconic voice from like A Clockwork Orange, and it just carries through here where you actually kind of fear the man talking. And I don't know if that's a talent or a curse, but I guess it works in his favor, but he does a phenomenal job in this movie. I think he is definitely the best of the acting performances, even though Natasha Kinski's performance is actually really well too, and she stars in one of my favorite movies of all time from 1984 called Paris, Texas, so I always do enjoy her work. She's actually a very great actress. But for me, those are the only 2 acting performances that are really well done. Like I said earlier, Frankie Faison's character is dubbed, and the dialogue that his character delivers is pretty awful, and I think it's just the script's fault, not the actual person delivering the dialogue, because Annette O'Toole is a very good actress too, and the line she's forced to deliver can come off really cheesy, but they also seem like they're poorly delivered, and I just feel like it's a script problem, in my opinion. It doesn't, because like this movie is just so well directed. The story is pretty tight, even if you think it's a little bit cheesy and ridiculous. It's still a pretty tight story. It's very well made. I just think that the script itself and the acting performances, not from the leads, are pretty poor at best. Even John Hurt, who I love in this movie and is one of my, and who I think always does a really great job, sometimes his performance can seem just not great. And that really does hurt me to say that because, like I said, I'm a big fan of John Hurt, and it doesn't work all the time. This is a very mixed bag of a movie. One thing that I did notice that I thought was actually really cool, when the helicopter, there's a scene in this movie where a helicopter is hovering above like a lake or a river or a swamp because they're in New Orleans, and the score is like a very like dum dum, just like in The Thing. It's got that same exact score, almost like in the beginning of The Thing where the helicopter is hovering above the dog and shooting at it. Almost the exact same score, which is weird because both of these films came out in 1982. And the score is very 80s Sith heavy. I like you! Which for me is awesome. So, like, I don't know if I've said this on the channel, but it is one of my favorite things when a movie uses a Sith 80s score. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but for me that personally works perfectly, and I think the score is another thing that works really well for this movie, that helps to carry it along, and just the way it's shot is beautiful. So you're never bored in this movie, but like I said, the acting performances and the actual dialogue itself can kind of drag the movie down. There is also points in this movie where it does kind of slow down, which might not work for people, but like I said, the scenes where there actually is no dialogue were some of my favorite scenes, just because it becomes very moody, and the tone of the film very much works for me. It's that very horror tone that I really do enjoy, that Paul Schrader himself knows how to really nail, because at those points it does feel like some of Paul Schrader's other movies, like Hardcore or Blue Collar or Mishima, because he's just such a technical director that you can actually see that it doesn't matter what the material he's making is, because this is a remake of a 1942 film, also by RKO Pictures. You could just see that he just knows how to craft a film and make what I think in lesser hands this movie could have been awful, forgotten about, never even get a Scream Factory 4K release, never get a cult following, for the fact that Paul Schrader made this movie, and Paul Schrader just knows how to make a film. In like the words of wrestling, everyone knows that Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and one of the things that people always say about Shawn Michaels is he can get a good match out of a broom. Paul Schrader's the kind of director, he could take a bad screenplay or a movie that in lesser hands would just be awful and actually make it a decent and enjoyable watch, because I still had fun watching this movie, and I can recommend it, even if it's not to the highest degree of other Paul Schrader movies. It's still going to be enjoyable, and I still think you're going to really enjoy your time. Let's move on to the Scream Factory 4K Blu Ray release that just came out. Scream Factory has just put out this brand new 4K release of Cat People. Now, they did actually release a Blu-ray from 2014 from 8 years ago, but this one has a brand new 4K scan from the original film negative with Dolby Vision and HDR10 put on top of it, and it is beautiful. That is the shining star of this, and that's also really the only new thing that's an upgrade from the 2014 edition, is that, because the audio, which is a DTS HD 5.1, is the exact same audio that's on the previous Blu-ray release. The only thing that's new is the actual 4K scan of this movie, and it is a huge upgrade from what I could find from the Blu-ray from 2014. The reviews for that were actually pretty negative, saying that the movie looked pretty ugly, and I don't have that Blu-ray release to compare it to. The only other times I've actually watched this movie were on DVD and on streaming, so I've never actually seen that, so I can't confirm it, but from what I was able to find from other people's reviews of this, is that the Blu-ray was pretty poorly made. I can report to you guys that actually this 4K is gorgeous. Now, this is a 1982 film, and one thing that I always worry about when you make a new 4K scan of a movie is that they actually make the movie look too good, make it look too modern. You don't want to lose that 80s tone. This is a 1982 film. This is a 40-year-old movie, and you don't want to lose that 1982 tone. What you want to do is just really clean up the film and make it look like what the original film negative did look like, and I really do think that that's exactly what they did here. I think they nailed the visuals on this. Right in the beginning, like I said, the opening credits are gorgeous, and that's where the HDR and the Dolby Vision, I watched it in Dolby Vision, really did shine. It just looked beautiful, and that shifts right into a scene in the airport, and you see the reflections off the floor where that used to look so flat in previous releases of this, and now it just popped, and you just saw right away from the very early part of this movie that they did such a good job with the restoration that I was personally like blown away by the visuals. I'm like, okay, that's the star of this, that's where all the effort in, and I can ignore the fact, at least for temporarily, that there are new extras and there isn't a brand new Atmos track, which I'm going to be honest, I don't think that this needed it. I thought the 5.1 was actually very good. I was surprised at it, how much the use of all the speakers was going on. I didn't expect that at all. There were points in this movie where like the score settles in and you can hear like sirens, and I thought like the sirens were actually coming from outside my house, I swear to God. And that's coming from a pretty old 8-year-old track now, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised at how good it was, and I could see now why they didn't do an Atmos track. I would have loved to have heard that Atmos track, but I can't say it's a bad track that's on here right now, and I definitely can't give a failing grade to the audio because I thought it was actually pretty well made, even if it's not new. Like I said, the visuals are amazing, the audio was great, the extras are pretty much identical to the previous Blu-ray release, but they're new to me, so that's actually still pretty cool to see. It's mostly interviews, trailer, on the set with Paul Schrader as he's on the set of Cat People, which is really cool. Some matte paintings, which are really beautiful because this movie, like I said, is actually very gorgeous to look at visually, and the 4K obviously is going to help that along. And the theatrical trailer. These are all on the previous Scream Factory Blu-ray release from 2014, but it's nice that they came over. I'm a big fan of retrospects, and there are plenty of interviews. I would love a documentary. I don't expect that for a film like this. This is very much a cult-following Paul Schrader film. It's probably one of his more popular films in the mainstream because a lot of people do love horror, and I don't expect everyone to love like Mishima, Blue Collar, or Hardcore, or even more recently like First Reformed or The Card Counter. But I think that this is probably the one Paul Schrader movie that everyone, or at least in the horror community, would know. And I think in the horror community, I think you're definitely going to want to grab this packaging. If you look at it, it's got a gorgeous slipcover. That was actually what caught my eye and really drove it home for me to buy it. It looks a lot better than the previous release, which I think has had the theatrical poster on it, but one thing you get that awesome silver top that it's a Scream Factory release. Underneath it, you get the same poster with the black 4K Ultra HD, and then you go inside. And actually, this is something I really did love. I love that this is something that, it's a little detail, I try and bring it up and champion as much as I can, is that the actual physical disc design, I truly do love it when they do things like this. The Blu-ray is in purple and the 4K is in red. I love that it's the combination of the colors that you see throughout the movie, and I'm a big fan of, obviously, of this color pattern. Our logo is actually a big combination of purple and red, so I really love that they did this with the disc design with the trees, which is kind of like in the leopard world is what they're trying to show you. I really do love the actual design and the packaging that they did for Cat People. That was actually what really caught my eye and made me decide, you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to go watch this again. Even though I don't really love it, I'm going to actually see this again because I really want to see the actual 4K because it looks like they put a lot of effort in, and they really did put it into the visuals. A lot of the rest, you could argue with me that it is phoned in, but I really do think it's still overall a great package. And if you are a fan of Cat People, you're going to want to grab this actual edition of it because I think this is the best edition we are going to get, at least for a long time. This is 8 years since the last Blu-ray release, and that Blu-ray release really was the one that we had to hang on to for a very long time. So I think that you're going to be very happy that there's a brand new scan, and if you are a fan of a huge visual upgrade, you're going to get a big visual upgrade when it comes to this. Just don't expect it in audio and extras. But if you are new to the film, I can't highly recommend it. You really have to know what you're going into. But if you are a horror fan, I definitely can recommend checking this out. But if I'm going to give an overall score to the film, the packaging, the visuals, the audio, and the extras, I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. There was a lot of work put into this visual restoration, and it really shows. The audio is the same track, but it's still a very good track. Not as many extras as I would have liked, or at least new extras. And the packaging is beautiful. The film itself kind of drags down the final score because I'm not a personally huge fan of it, but if you are, just know that the actual Scream Factory 4K release is incredible as far as visuals go, and I think it'll be worth the upgrade for you. And as always, guys, thanks for joining me here on another episode of Let's Talk. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and tell all your friends.